My name is John DeWert, and I'll be doing my presentation on The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. This is going to be my literary analysis for English 104. My thesis is Love versus War, and I will tell you about that in a minute. So my introduction to The Things They Carried, just to get you guys familiar with it. It's a story by Tim O'Brien. He's a Vietnam veteran, and he writes about the things that the soldiers had to carry throughout war, whether this be emotionally, physically, and anything else they had to carry with their military gear or anything like that. This is a little picture I have, a quote by Tim O'Brien. He writes, "The things may happen to be a total lie. Another thing may not happen and be truer than the truth." I'll get into this a little bit further, but a lot of Vietnam's veterans choose to write when they get older. This is just because they've suppressed it so much and they just want to get the story out there for people to know. And I'll get to that in a minute. So my thesis, as stated, is love versus war. This is because the men are constantly drawn between the things they love and the war-drawn environment they face in the Vietnam War. Everybody knows how tough it was in the Vietnam War, or any war in general. You go through so much trauma in life in a short amount of time that you really can't begin to imagine what they were going through. Just a little quote from Tim O'Brien. "To carry something was to hump it, as when Lieutenant Jimmy Cross humped his love for Martha up the hills and through the swamps. In its intrusive form, to hump meant to walk or to march, but it implied burdens far beyond the intrusive." Another one is, "Rat Kiley carried comic books. Kua carried a devout Baptist, carried an illustrative New Testament that had been presented by him to his father, who's taught Sunday school in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma." As you can see, these men were burdened by much more than their thoughts, by much more than the equipment they carried, and everything else they had to go through. So when they were trying to go through all this, they were also carrying all the burdens that they had with family back home and everything else. My literary analysis of The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien is that he used a lot of third-person view to get his point across and to make the reading more enjoyable for the reader and to get them more interested. In an article written by Raman Silbergard, he titled it "Making Things Present." He talks a lot about the point of view of the book and how it is written, and wants to emphasize that Tim O'Brien uses this to entertain and keep the reader interested in the book, as stated. In the article, Robin writes, "I argue that the book's self-conscious use of fiction ability works to create a sense of presence for the reader, focusing on the particular use of the bodily images in the things of Vietnam. It does help explain in a different detail why some people have a hard time comprehending the stories of Vietnam War era." The author uses the third-person point of view to not only get his point across in the story, but to show more than one person's point of view and try to get it around the fact that everybody else was going through something different, and everybody else carried something different, everybody else went through something different, everybody else witnessed something different. So when the author uses the third-person point of view, it helps the reader understand more of what's going on and helps his point get across and helps to understand the reasoning why my thesis is love versus war, because even though you are in a war environment, you're constantly drawn towards the things that you love. Another literary element of the story that Tim O'Brien uses is imagery. He uses this to get his point across and make you more in tune to the story. The quote from the book is, "In the first week of April, before Jimmy Lavender died, Lieutenant Jimmy Cross received a good luck charm from Martha. It was a simple pebble, an ounce at most, smooth to the touch. It was a milky white color with flecks of orange and violet, oval shaped like a miniature egg." He tries to use this to make you imagine the things that they do carry. Just as a simple pebble that, for him, pronounced the love of Martha, which was the love of his life at home, but it wasn't necessarily pronounced that between those two. But it's just simple things like that that they used in the war to help them get through and they would fall asleep with it, walk with it, and take it everywhere they go and would not lose it. My ending statement for the book and my literal analysis of it is that Tim O'Brien is an older vet, and sometimes the things that they say when they get older aren't entirely true. So you have to read the book and also take a grain of salt that these men have carried this for 60, 70 years with them, possibly longer, and some of these things that have been depressed in their mind sometimes change. As the statement at the beginning, some things that aren't said might be even truer than things that are said, because these men went through so much trauma that their PTSD will sometimes trick their brain into thinking something that happened was not the correct thing that did happen. So this little thing is how someone died, or a certain story that maybe 3 or 4 years after the war that they made up turns out to be the truth for them, even though it might not actually be true. So due to all the years, they chose to tell these stories to get them out there. As you can see, a lot of wartime stories or anything like that, wartime movies, are based off of wars that happened a long time ago. If you know anybody that is a Vietnam veteran, if you know anybody a part of a war, they normally do not want to talk about it. And at the end of the years, they try to get it out there and tell the story how it was and how they think they remember it. This is because they realize when they get older that people need to realize these stories and realize the horrors that they left with, so they would not entice another war in the future. And that's their worst nightmare, is another war gets started and then their sons and daughters and granddaughters and grandsons have to go to these wars and they have to relive that moment. That's why my thesis is there will always be a battle where there's love and war. And this is due to no matter where you are and what situation you're in, it could be the worst situation in your life, you're always going to fall back on what you love. It could be as simple as what Tim O'Brien mentioned was the little pebble. Martha and him weren't even in a relationship, they weren't married at all, but that is something that got him through the war and got him to realize that something is worth fighting for. And even though this assignment was only on the first chapter of Tim O'Brien's book, the things they carried, some things people need to realize is these men that go to the war, they didn't choose to. So when they do go, they want to take anything that is familiar with them or anything that they do love, a Bible, whether it be a pebble, or anything like that. But the main thing is they didn't just carry their SOP, which is military gear. They didn't just carry physical things. They also carried physical burdens, which happens to be the worst thing that they do carry and turns out to be the heaviest. So again, this is my literary oral presentation for English Lit 104. Thank you for watching.